Hello everyone, welcome to our another lab, which is in the lab series for CompTIA A+ Core 1. In this lab, we are going to install a power supply. Here is the instruction. You are the IT administrator for a small corporate network. You are repairing a computer in the IT administration office, which appeared to have a failed power supply. After testing the power supply and confirming the failure, you remove it from the computer. Now you need to select a replacement power supply. As you already hear from the scenario, you as a technician, you are already checked the power supply issue. You already determine if the power supply is not working correct. Next step is to replace. As IT technician, you maybe not really work with the power supply because depend on the company you work for, but as the scenario say, you are working for a small corporate network, which is reality in the small corporate network. Since they don't have different IT department, you will maybe end up to do every single thing. So because of that, this is not really a surprise that as an IT technician or as IT specialist that you will be deal with the power supply. However, since we have given this lab, we have to follow the instruction and exactly do what it's supposed to do. So in this lab, your task is to first install the power supply. So in order to install the power supply, that power supply and the computer monitor should be matched. How they match? They have to match by different things. The most common way that you have to check first is if there's the right connection or the right connector for the power supply. Where you get that information from? The only way you can get that information from the motherboard documentation and also to check the power supply documentation. As IT technician, it's your responsibility to read and understand all the instructions that have been given to you. Because of that, as we see down here, the first instructions say the power supply must have the appropriate power connection for the motherboard and the CPU. It's not only for motherboard. That is really interesting thing that you have to understand. It should be match exactly the CPU, which means it could be work for power motherboard, but doesn't work for the CPU. Because of that, you have to make sure it works for both. Second, we can start with this one first. So let's check this one. Since that is the main thing before even we do the next step, we have to determine which power supply we have to use. So in order to get that information, we have to move to the inventory, and under inventory, we have seen that there's two main things that are listed. The first one is power supply itself, which we have different power supply. Before we determine which one we have, first we have to read the motherboard documentation. In order to do that, you have to back here and go to motherboard and then click on the motherboard. If you don't click on motherboard, as you see, the yellow circle line is outside, which is very much talking about the entire of the computer. If we pull up this information, everything is talking about the computer connection. It doesn't talk about the motherboard. Because of that, you have to make sure you click on the motherboard. So as you see right here, the yellow line is circled. That is pop up the motherboard on the right side, and then we can read the information that we pull it up down here. So we have to drag this one to down here and make sure that we have to read the power supply information that we have. So since there's so many connection, or maybe you already work with the the motherboard before, you will understand. Maybe you quickly know where exactly the power supply is supposed to be connected, which is you can easily guess. But or you just read through the listed number and look for the power supply. As you see right here, number one is the CPU over voltage jumper, which is 3-pin CPU volts. That's number one, which we have down here. But number two, which is ATX power connector, 24-pin ET XMWR, which is 8-pin ETX 12 voltage. The first part is for the motherboard that's supposed to be connected to the motherboard. The second part is for CPU. That means we have to have 24-pin power supply connector, and then we need the 8-pin for the CPU connector. I think that information is enough for us in order to determine which power supply we need, because that's the first two things that already mentioned in the instruction. If we have something that connected to the motherboard and we have that, that's good. That's maybe enough for us to conclude that is the right power supply that we're going to use. So in order to do that, we have to go back to the inventory again and go through the power supply. In order to get the information from power supply, you just need to click on power supply, and it will list it all the connector, different connector down here. So the connector power supply, 4-pin for power supply, still flip, 4-pin, 4-pin, 4-pin. Everything is 4-pin. And finally, we see 24-pin. Since we are looking for 24, this is the first thing that we decide, oh, this is not the right one. We know that. Then we move to the second one. The second one, at least we are looking for 24. We want to make sure we have the 24. So as you see right here, the first one is 24 connection, which is 20 plus 4. That one we have to look for before we conclude that's the right one. We have to make sure we have the 8 piece of a pin, which doesn't list it down here. So since we proved that we have 1, but we don't really have 8 for CPU, so we have to keep moving, which is the final one, which we guess that should be the right one. So how we know? Again, we have to go through and then make sure we have 24 pin. And not only that, we see down here, there's 8 pin for CPU. That is how you conclude from the given information that, and read the instruction, that you can conclude this is the right power supply. So you have to drag to the workstation, or you can drag to the right place. So after that, you can move on to next instruction, which said the power supply must support adding graphics card that require its own power connector. So we can read for more information, but as I said, since we already confirmed that is fulfilled, the first one, we can go with that, and then I think that will be okay. And then in the sleeve, the power supply is seated just below the motherboard. So the motherboard is right here, as we already say. So it said that it should be, the power supply should be go here. So that's how you know. Maybe you already worked with it before, that way you can know, or you just read the instruction, which is the thing you have to do. You don't have to believe what you already know only. but you have to read the instruction as good IT technician. So you drag that one in here, and then after that, we have to follow the instruction. What the instruction says, make the following connection from the power supply. So in order to get that, we have to click on the power supply and do one by one. The first one is connect the motherboard to power connector. As we already checked, we have 24 pins. So if you click on the power supply, it will pop up all the connector on the right side. So you have to grab that and then make sure that will go there. And also move to the connect the CPU power. As we already say, it's right there, it's the CPU power. And if you don't know where is actually the CPU power or where is the motherboard connector, you still go back to read the motherboard instruction from here, actually. But as we see that on number 2 before, we already know like the powers, the CPUs should be right there. So that's where it's supposed to be go. So number 2. Because of that, we just back to power supply, grab 8 piece of that, and then we have to connect that right there. So that concludes, we successfully connect the motherboard CPU. Now we have to connect the power connector for the SATA, which is hard drive. So we see down here, we have 3 different hard drive, which wasn't given, it doesn't ask us to put the other one down here, I think, which we can if you want, but that's what we already have. So we just connect the only thing what we have. So we have to go through the SATA and connect the power supply right there. And that one is already connected, actually. And the one which is not connected, that's what we're going to connect. Any of it which is not connected, because all of it is the same thing right there. So that conclude that 3 is the only drive that we have out there. And then now we are moving on to start the computer. So it's a plug the computer using the existing cable, plug it into the power supply. In order to do that, we have to turn the computer to the back side, and this is where we just put the power supply. This is the power supply we just put in there, and then that's where we have to connect it. And as you see, there's a connector which is connected to the wall. If you click on that, and make sure you have to click on the power supply, so that one is connected to this. That's where it goes. So we're not going to use the wall one, so we have to use that's why they say existing. So if you use the power supply and then plug to here and plug to the computer, because of the lab, it worked, but because of the lab, it's not going to be work for you. So you have to make sure you select the one from here. So to make sure we select the right one, I want to turn back this monitor to make sure which one is connected. So in order to get that one, you have to just click on the monitor. So as you see, this one is already connected to the monitor, which means you cannot able to use this one. So which one you're going to use? Just click on the other one and make sure the other side is not connected, even though the male side is already connected, which is right here, and the female side of the power AC is not connected. So we can connect that right here. So after we connect that, it's a turn on the power supply using the switch on the back. So we just put the power supply there. It doesn't on, so like on and off, which is which is 0 and 1, in other words. But we have to turn on. Okay. Now we have to turn on the computer to boot into the window, which is hopefully going to be conclude this lab, which we'll see if it works or not. Let's turn it on the computer. It's loading. Hopefully that's the good sign. So you see the computer is loading, which means the power supply is working. Here we go. The computer is successfully loading. In order to check that if it's right or wrong, we have to score the lab. Let's do it together. Here we go. As you see, we score 100% and everything is perfectly done. Thank you for watching. See you in another lab.